The engine of my old Subaru groaned in protest as I pressed it up the Richardson Highway, the Alaska wilderness stretching around me like an endless frozen ocean. October wind clawed through the gaps in my cracked windshield, carrying the first icy bite of winter that made my skin prickle. I squinted through the dimming light, focusing on the small cluster of buildings that marked Copper Center, a speck of civilization in a sea of spruce and snow-capped peaks. 29 years old, broke, and down to my last $800. I had driven for 18 straight hours from Fairbanks, fueled by desperation and bitter gas station coffee. The envelope in my glove compartment held the remnants of my life. Money I had scraped together after years feeding slot machines in Reno. All of it gone now. My apartment had been repossessed. My car had been taken back by the lender. Sarah's engagement ring, my last desperate gesture, had been pawned 3 months ago, swallowed by the same addiction that had stolen everything else. Copper Center wasn't much. A diner glowed faintly in the gathering twilight, its steamed windows promising warmth and safety. Smoke spiraled from a few scattered chimneys, and two gas stations faced each other across the road, their fluorescent lights stark against the encroaching dark. One was a modern Chevron, its LED glow clean and welcoming. Truckers moved between pumps, voices carrying in the crisp air. Safe, normal. Across the street, Midnight Express gas slouched in shadow. Its neon sign flickered like a dying candle. The peeling white paint, the grime-smeared windows, the two ancient pumps standing sentinel. It felt like a place that had been forgotten long before I arrived. Hunger reminded me that I hadn't eaten since Fairbanks. I pushed the thought aside, telling myself I needed warmth first. The diner door chimed as I entered, and the heat hit me like a physical slap. The smell of bacon grease, burnt coffee, and something indefinably old filled the air. A few locals glanced at me over cracked vinyl boots. A waitress approached, her steel gray hair pulled back tightly, a scar running from her ear to her mouth. "Coffee?" she asked, already reaching for the pot. "Please," I muttered, sliding onto a stool, grateful for the warmth. "Looking for work?" I asked. She studied me with pale blue eyes that seemed to weigh me, measuring me like meat on a scale. "Depends on what you can do. Trucking companies always looking for drivers. Need a CDL though. Logging, seasonal. Otherwise..." Her gaze flicked to the darkened gas station across the road. "There's a night shift opening at Midnight Express, but I wouldn't recommend it." "Why not?" Her scar twitched as she spoke. "That place isn't right after dark. Stick to the Chevron if you're smart." I smiled thinly, but my stomach growled. My options were few. "Where do I apply?" She jerked her chin toward a bulletin board by the door. Flyers plastered with yard sales, lost cats, church events, and, tucked in the corner, a yellowed sheet with neat handwriting. Night shift attendant needed. Midnight Express gas. $18 per hour. Remote. Reliable. Only draws normal and strange customers. Strange customers. The words seemed to echo in my mind. I copied the number into my phone and returned to the counter. "You sure about this?" she asked, pouring more coffee. "I need the work," I said simply. She shook her head and refilled my cup without another word. "Your funeral, kid." The call was answered after 3 rings. "Carl speaking." The gruff voice sounded like gravel. I explained who I was and the position I was calling about. "Available to start tonight?" "Yes, sir." "Meet me at the station at 9. Bring ID and be ready to work." By 9 p.m., I pulled into Midnight Express's gravel lot. The Subaru's headlights revealed the building in more detail than distance allowed. Blistered white paint, grime-coated windows, ancient pumps, everything drenched in the kind of quiet neglect that made your stomach tighten. A man in his 60s waited by the door, lean and weathered like old leather, flannel crisp, eyes sharp. Carl Morrison. He unlocked the front door. 20 years managing this place," he said, voice even. "Never had a problem as long as rules are followed." "You follow rules, kid?" "Yes, sir." The interior smelled of dust, coffee, and something faintly sweet that I couldn't place. Carl handed me a sheet of rules and an envelope with 10 $20 bills. "Advance. You'll need it. Follow the rules exactly. They're your lifeline. 1. Keep all exterior lights on. Replace burned bulbs immediately. 2. If you hear someone calling your name between 2 and 3 a.m., ignore it. It's not a person. 3. If a child enters alone, do not acknowledge them. Continue working and they'll leave. 4. Never answer the store phone between 3:17 a.m. and 3:23 a.m., no matter how many times it rings. 5. If someone asks for directions to the old mining camp, say it burned down in 1987. 6. If a car pulls up with no one inside and the air gets hot, lock yourself in the office until it leaves. 7. Only call me during emergencies. The weight of the rules pressed on me. I flipped through the leather-bound logbook beside the register. Entries were mostly mundane. Sales, inventory, minor incidents. Scattered within were notations of children entering, strange calls, frost patterns forming on the cooler, repeated over decades. Employees who didn't follow the rules disappeared or ended up in hospitals, catatonic or worse. Outside, the wind rattled the building. The first hours passed slowly. A trucker arrived, nodding to me, whispering a warning about the station's reputation. A woman passed through moments later, visibly shaken by something unseen. The sense of isolation, the emptiness beyond the lights, pressed against me. Normal work, restocking, logging, cleaning, offered temporary refuge, but the air seemed alive, expectant. Shadows moved just beyond the reach of the fluorescence, and a faint chill brushed my skin. At 11:30, I found a drawing under the cash register, a child's crayon sketch of the gas station. A dark figure stood just outside the lights, hands stretched unnaturally long. Below, in shaky letters, "Friend." My stomach churned. The logbook revealed repeated encounters, frost patterns, strange phone calls, the same child appearing over decades. Each time, rules had been followed, and the employee survived. Each time, deviations ended in catastrophe. The night was stretching into a slow, suffocating nightmare, and the rules were all I had to cling to. Hours crept by, the station's humming appliances and flickering lights punctuating the silence. At midnight, the phone rang. Heavy breathing, wet and deep, filled the line. No words, only presence. I logged it, heart hammering. Outside, the wind tore through the trees. Frost formed on every surface, letters tracing pleas for help. Help. By 2 a.m., voices. Sarah's, my sister's, my father's, called from nowhere. Perfect mimicry, calculated to make me falter. I gripped the counter, silent. The rules, Carl's unwavering rules, anchored me. 2:45 a.m. A child entered, small, pale, frozen in time. Rule 3. Ignore. My body screamed against it, instincts demanding action, but I kept my eyes down. Frost spelled words again, so cold. Help. The night pressed on, each moment a trial. Electrical disturbances, phantom vehicles, shadows moving independently, voices of past employees trapped between worlds, all converging. The station was alive, testing, tempting, relentless. Yet, I endured, repeating the rules like a mantra. Carl's experience, 20 years of survival, was the lifeline I clung to. 3 a.m. came with a silence so complete it felt like the world had been drained of sound. The wind died. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to vanish. leaving only my heartbeat and the faint echo of my own breath. It was then I noticed movement outside the frosted windows. Shadows stretched impossibly long under the dim glow of the flickering neon sign. Shapes I couldn't identify shifted near the pumps. I told myself it was exhaustion, that my eyes were playing tricks after hours of vigilance. Still, my gut churned with unease, the primal part of me screaming that something wasn't right. Then the lights flickered, not just a minor flicker, but a violent pulse, like the station itself had taken a breath, preparing to strike. I clutched the edge of the counter as the ceiling lights dimmed, shadows deepening, the room growing impossibly colder. My skin prickled. The logbook warned of nights like this, nights where employees doubted the rules, tested the boundaries. Carl's voice echoed in my mind. Follow the rules exactly. They're your lifeline. I glanced at the clock. 3:17 a.m. The phone began to ring, shrill and piercing, as if it had been waiting for this precise moment. I froze. Rule 4. Never answer the store phone between 3:17 a.m. and 3:23 a.m. No matter how many times it rings. My fingers hovered, trembling, over the receiver. Each ring reverberated through the empty building, each tone carrying an urgency that clawed at my sanity. The line continued until 3:23 a.m., ringing 7 times in total, then abruptly went silent. I exhaled shakily, a mix of relief and residual terror. By 3:30 a.m., fatigue had transformed into an almost tangible weight, pressing down on me. The station seemed to breathe in tandem with my own nervous breaths. The shadows shifted again. A vehicle arrived, or at least the illusion of one. Headlights sliced through the darkness outside, but no engine sound accompanied them. The heat rose unnaturally, a wave washing over the building. Rule 6. If a car pulls up with no one inside and the air gets hot, lock yourself in the office until it leaves. My legs moved on their own, my body obeying instinct born of survival rather than thought. The office door clicked shut, the lock sliding into place. Heart hammering, I watched from the small office window as the vehicle remained parked, its presence oppressive, its headlights bright yet empty. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, the heat dissipated, the vehicle vanished, silence returned, heavier than before. I slumped in the office chair, trembling. The rules were keeping me alive. That much was clear. At 4:15 a.m., a man entered the store. Not a local, I could tell from the heavy boots and fur-lined jacket that had snow melting along the seams. He moved slowly, deliberately, his face obscured by the hood. He approached the counter, placing a hand on the surface, not looking directly at me. His voice was calm, unnervingly so. "I'm just passing through." Something about him was wrong. Every instinct screamed that he wasn't human, or at least not entirely. But he followed the rules. He didn't ask for directions to the old mining camp, didn't call out my name, didn't bring a child with him. He purchased a pack of gum, exact change, and left without incident. My hand shook as I logged the transaction, realizing that even in the midst of terror, adherence to the rules could create a narrow path through the madness. By 5 a.m., the first signs of dawn crept over the horizon, but they brought no relief. The sun's light barely penetrated the thick spruce trees surrounding the station. The landscape was an endless expanse of white and gray, silent and watchful. Yet, in that light, I noticed footprints in the fresh snow outside the pumps. Small, childlike. But the prints didn't move toward any destination. They ended abruptly in the middle of the lot, as if the child had vanished into thin air. I forced myself to check the logbook again, scanning the entries from past employees. One name caught my eye: Emily Dawson, night attendant, 1983. Notes: child appeared, followed rules, survived, left in silence. Beneath it, a single line in faded pencil: froze where she stood, but she survived because she obeyed. Another name: Thomas Grady, 1992. Notes: ignored the child, disappeared, never found. A shiver ran down my spine. The connection was undeniable. Survival wasn't about luck, it was about obedience, adherence to the rules. And the rules were strange, yes, but precise. Each one designed to navigate the hazards I couldn't fully comprehend. Hours passed in a blur of repetitive, mechanical tasks: cleaning, restocking, counting change, monitoring the pumps. My mind floated between exhaustion and hypervigilance, caught in a strange limbo where reality felt stretched thin. At 6 a.m., another child appeared. Pale, frozen hair, eyes dark yet glinting with something ancient. My stomach dropped, instincts urging me to act, to comfort, to interact. But Rule 3 echoed: if a child enters alone, do not acknowledge them. Continue working and they'll leave. My body moved on autopilot. I pretended to sort shells, pretending not to notice. Minutes crawled. The child remained, staring, unmoving. I could feel its gaze, cold and calculating. My hands trembled, sweat slicking my palms. Then, as silently as they had arrived, the child vanished. I exhaled, realizing the tension had been enough to warp the world around me. The frost on the windows had formed strange patterns during this encounter, letters that spelled out nothing coherent, only shapes that seemed to writhe when not looked at directly. Breakfast truckers began arriving around 7 a.m., their engines breaking the heavy quiet. The normalcy of their arrival was both comforting and alien, a reminder that the world beyond the station existed, though it felt 1,000 miles away. I served coffee mechanically, listening to conversations about hunting, snow conditions, and local politics. Yet every so often, a glance outside reminded me that the shadows hadn't disappeared, only receded. At 8 a.m., the first real human interaction that felt like relief occurred. Carl called, his voice sharp but approving. "You're doing fine. Follow the rules exactly. Keep this up, and you'll make it through. The rest of the night's on you. The strange hours are the real test. Keep vigilant." The words carried weight beyond the obvious. The night had already proven dangerous, but Carl's tone suggested it was far from over. Every second from 8 a.m. onward until my shift ended was a negotiation with the unseen forces inhabiting the station. The building itself seemed aware, listening, judging, probing. I survived the rest of the shift by following every instruction, every written and unwritten command. By 9 a.m., I was relieved to hand over the logbook to Carl's incoming replacement, feeling as though I had navigated a labyrinth of nightmares unscathed. Yet the weight of the night lingered. Sleep was impossible. The cold, the silence, the eerie movements outside, and the knowledge of what could have happened if I'd made a single mistake haunted me. Driving back to Fairbanks later, the first rays of sunlight breaking over the mountains, I reflected on the experience. Midnight Express wasn't just a gas station. It was a test, a sentient entity with rules etched into decades of survival. Those rules were lifelines, bridges across a chasm I couldn't see, but felt in every nerve of my body. And the shadows, the voices, the children, they were waiting, always waiting. That night, I returned to the station for my second shift. My nerves taut like piano wires. The air was thicker, heavier, carrying the scent of something metallic that didn't belong to gasoline or the snow. As I stepped inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, low and ominous, casting elongated shadows that seemed to slither along the walls. I reminded myself, stick to the rules. They were my only protection. Around 11:45 p.m., I began the routine checks. Register, pumps, inventory, and security cameras. But tonight, something was wrong. The cameras flickered. The monitors displayed static for a moment, then snapped back to reality. In one feed, the lot appeared empty, but then I saw it. A figure, pale, blurred, standing behind a pump, watching. I rubbed my eyes, convinced exhaustion was playing tricks. When I looked again, the figure was gone. Midnight struck. Rule 1. Never leave the counter unattended between midnight and 2 a.m. I stayed rooted, scanning the lot, the store aisles, every shadow. The faint humming of the fluorescent lights became a low, rhythmic pulse, almost like a heartbeat syncing with mine. And then I heard it. Whispers, faint at first, like wind through the broken vent above the office. I froze. The whispers grew clearer, forming words I couldn't understand, but felt instinctively dangerous. By 12:30 a.m., the first anomaly of the night occurred. A soda can rolled off the shelf. I didn't touch it. Rule 7. If merchandise moves on its own, do not pick it up. It's a signal, not an accident. I watched as the can spun in a perfect circle before coming to rest. The whispers intensified. I could feel eyes on me, numerous, unseen, pressing down, probing. At 1:15 a.m., the first customer arrived. A man, or what appeared to be a man, entered wearing a hat pulled low, hiding his features. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost unnatural. He carried no items but wandered the aisles, pausing occasionally as if listening. I maintained eye contact only when necessary, sticking rigidly to the rules. No conversation beyond transactions. No question. No acknowledgement of oddities. He left at 1:50 a.m., silently, leaving the store untouched. No receipt. No record of a purchase. The clock ticked toward 2 a.m., the hour when the station's strange rules demanded utmost caution. Rule 9. Between 2 a.m. and 2:33 a.m., never turn your back to the door or windows. Observance equals survival. I adjusted my stance, constantly scanning reflections in the glass, shadows along the walls. Then I noticed something impossible: snow footprints appearing inside the store, small, childlike, and wet, forming from the entrance toward the counter. My heart jumped. They stopped a few feet away from me. I didn't move, didn't breathe too heavily, forcing myself to remain calm. The whispers returned, closer now, more distinct, forming a language that resonated in my chest. Rule 12. Do not attempt to speak to voices you cannot see. Silence is your armor. I obeyed, my body frozen, hands gripping the edge of the counter. The air became icy, each breath forming clouds that lingered longer than physically possible. I watched as the footprints slowly retreated, fading as though swallowed by the floorboards themselves. By 3 a.m., the station transformed. The temperature plummeted, frost forming along the edges of the windows. Shadows twisted unnaturally, bending toward corners, stretching across the ceiling. Rule 15. If shadows move against natural light, do not react. Ignore them and they will pass. My eyes darted involuntarily, but I forced focus on the counter. The entire building seemed alive, pulsing, aware. 3:17 a.m. approached, the cursed minute. Rule 4 echoed. Never answer the phone between 3:17 and 3:23 a.m. The ringing started, shrill, high-pitched, slicing through the heavy air. 7 rings exactly. No more, no less. My hands hovered but didn't touch the receiver. Each tone felt like a test, an examination of my willpower. When the ringing stopped, the silence that followed was louder than the noise, oppressive, suffocating. Then came the footsteps, bare, soft, deliberate, moving toward the counter. Rule 3. If a child enters alone, do not acknowledge them. Continue your work. I froze. A small figure emerged, pale, hair tangled, eyes dark pools that reflected more than just light. It stood near the candy aisle, swaying slightly, staring at nothing, yet somehow aware of me. My body obeyed instinct. I didn't look directly, didn't move toward it, didn't speak. Time stretched. Minutes felt like hours. Then, as silently as it had appeared, the figure disappeared. The remaining hours were an exercise in hypervigilance. Every sound, shadow, and movement became a potential hazard. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional beep from the pumps, the rustling of the wind, all carried a new weight. I moved like a machine, obeying each rule with religious precision. 5 a.m. brought my first break of the night. A trucker at the window, a mundane human, speaking in monotone, unaware of the supernatural theater around him. The contrast was jarring. Normality existed, but it felt fragile, temporary, as if one wrong step could tear the veil and reveal the horrors lurking just outside perception. 6 a.m. arrived with a light snowstorm, painting the lot white. But the snow wasn't just snow. It carried impressions, shapes, faint lines that looked like fingers reaching from the ground toward the sky. Rule 17. Never attempt to read messages in the snow. They are not for you. I averted my gaze, heart hammering, focusing only on the pumps, on the faint glow of the neon sign, on the mundane, until sunrise filtered weakly through the dense trees. When my shift ended at 9 a.m., I handed over the logbook to the next attendant with trembling hands. Carl's voice crackled in the radio. You did well. But don't get complacent. Night 2 is worse. The rules intensify. Some things are learning to test you. Some things know when you hesitate. His tone held more weight than words, more threat than reassurance. Driving back to Fairbanks, the daylight felt both welcoming and alien. The world outside the station was normal, or at least normal to the uninitiated. But I knew what I had survived, what had been hovering just beyond human comprehension. Midnight Express wasn't merely a gas station. It was a sentient gauntlet, alive with rules that governed the thin line between life and disappearance. And I had followed them, every single one, to survive. Yet, despite the relief, exhaustion, and lingering terror, I couldn't shake the feeling that the station had learned something about me, and I had learned something about it, something that could never be unlearned. Every shadow, every whisper, every childlike figure had left a mark, not on paper, not in memory alone, but in the marrow of my being. The next night, I returned, unable to shake the compulsion that Midnight Express had over me. It was as if the station had embedded itself in my mind, tugging me back. Carl's voice on the radio warned me again, but the words felt hollow compared to the gravity of what I already knew. The rules were more than instructions. They were survival, and failure meant something beyond comprehension. As soon as I stepped inside, the temperature dropped sharply. Frost had already begun forming along the windows, despite the store's heaters running. The lights flickered. The hum of the fluorescent bulbs, a low, threatening drone. Shadows swirled along the walls with purpose, no longer random. Rule 21. If the air turns thick and cold, do not breathe deeply. Stay calm and continue your duties. I obeyed. Shallow breaths, every muscle tensed, every sense alert. At 12:11 a.m., the whispers returned, closer, more insistent, echoing from all directions. Unlike the previous nights, they weren't just words. They carried intent, probing, judging. I couldn't make out the language, but the meaning was unmistakable. You do not belong here. My hands trembled as I restocked shelves, cleaned counters, and performed every menial task with extreme caution. Every movement had to be precise, unbroken by hesitation, untainted by fear. Around 1:45 a.m., the first figure appeared, this time not childlike. Tall, faceless, limbs elongated, moving with an unnatural, jerking grace. I froze. Rule 6. If a figure approaches, do not engage. Maintain line of sight. Do not break focus. The entity circled the store silently, closer than any human should be able to get without touching. I could hear the faint scrape of its feet against the linoleum, smell a cold metallic tang radiating from it. Time dilated, seconds stretched into eternities. By 2:33 a.m., the critical hour had passed, but the entity remained, watching. The final test of the rules had begun. Rule 29. If the entity does not leave, remain stationary, perform your final task, and wait for daylight. My body obeyed, every instinct screaming to run, to hide. I completed the tasks. Cash counted, shelves organized, lights adjusted. The entity drifted closer, a silent observer. Then, without warning, receded. Sunrise never felt so sweet. The first light cut through the frost and shadows, washing the station in a harmless glow. I stepped outside, heart racing, body exhausted, feeling the full weight of survival. The snow outside was unmarked, pristine, as if the night's horrors had never touched it. Yet I knew differently. Midnight Express had not released me. It had merely accepted my adherence, for now. Driving away, the station faded behind the trees. Yet I could feel its presence lingering in my thoughts, in my vision, in the hollow spaces of my mind. I knew I would return. Rules had to be followed, nights endured, and each survival etched deeper into the story of those who dared to work the night shift in Alaska's unforgiving, eerie wilderness.